When you join a company, you might get Windows-based laptop. However, the applications which you are supposed to support might be on Linux. It is better for you to understand some of the important developer tools for Linux using Windows. In this sectional module, we'll go through those details. We'll start with the advanced editor called as Notepad++. We should be using Notepad++ to make configuration changes on Windows rather than using Notepad, which is a primitive editor. However, our files might be on remote machines. Notepad++ is set up locally. We might want to make certain changes to the configuration files that are there in Linux. Instead of copying the file from Linux to Windows and then use Notepad++ and then copy back onto the Linux, we can use tools such as WinSCP. Once WinSCP is set up, we should be able to open files remotely using our local editor, and we should be able to make the changes and save onto the remote machine directly. We don't need to copy files back and forth. We can edit the files which are there on remote machines directly using the combination of WinSCP and Notepad++. We'll also go through the details about WinSCP, about how to copy the files from our local machine onto remote Linux-based machines, and also vice versa. It comes quite handy while troubleshooting issues related to code, datasets, etc. By moving the files from remote machines onto our machines using UI-based tools. Rather than using SCP command to copy the files, we should be using WinSCP to copy the files back and forth between our Windows-based systems and the remote Linux-based systems. The combination of Notepad++ and WinSCP are quite effective to make changes to the configuration files which are there on remote machines. Also, it can be used to actually take care of making cosmetic changes to the code. However, sometimes we might have to develop the applications directly on the remote servers. For that, we have to have IDEs. Visual Studio Code is one of the viable options for the remote development. Once we go to the details related to using Visual Studio Code from the remote development perspective, we'll also set up additional tools such as Git, Git Bash, Beyond Compare, etc. on Windows. These are some of the tools which can come handy to improve our productivity to support applications that are set up on Linux using our Windows laptop. If you are provided with Windows-based laptop by your employer, make sure to work with IT organization of your employer and get licenses for these tools. Make sure you set up these on your Windows, and then your productivity will definitely be improved quite a lot. That being said, as part of the sectional module, we'll predominantly go to the details about setting up required developer tools to support applications on Linux-based systems using our Windows laptop or desktop. As part of this sectional module, we are going through the details related to developer tools for Linux using Windows, which means we'll be setting up a bunch of tools on Windows-based systems so that we can work on applications that are deployed on Linux. As part of supporting these applications which are deployed on Linux, we might have to edit code or even configuration files. Instead of using terminal, we should be able to use editors. First, let's go ahead and set up something called as Notepad++ on Windows. Already on Windows, we have something called as Notepad. However, Notepad is very primitive in nature. In this case, I'm actually searching for Notepad. You can see Notepad here. However, it is very primitive. Never ever use Notepad as a developer or as a support engineer. Make sure you have advanced editors such as Notepad++. In this section, we will primarily focus on Notepad+, and also we will actually go to the details with other tools as well. Let me close it for now. Now let's go ahead and install Notepad++ on this Windows-based machine. Keep in mind that Notepad++ is not available for Mac. For Mac, you might have to consider other tools. Assuming you are using Windows, you can follow this to actually install Notepad++ on Windows. Now we should be able to search for Notepad++ as part of the search bar here. You should be able to go to the downloads here. You can pick the latest version, click on download. It will take care of downloading the executable for you. Once the executable is downloaded, you can double click. It will take care of installing Notepad++ on this machine. Also, you can actually go to the folder. Then you should be able to double click on this. Click on OK. I'm actually going through typical installation process here, which means I'll just click on next whenever it prompt. Let me agree here. Let me click on next. You can see that Notepad++ is being installed under C program files. Let's click on next. Let's click on next. Install. It will take care of installing Notepad++. You can enable this to run Notepad++ now and see how the interface is. If you don't want it to run, you can deselect as well. Let me make sure I select this and then click on finish so that I can show how Notepad++ interface will be. You can see the difference between Notepad++ and Notepad. This is a lot more flexible for us. Typically, you can use these type of editors to edit any files locally as well as via remote access. We'll also see how to access those files that are there on Linux using Notepad++. For that, we need to have additional tools. Let's go ahead and set up additional tool called as WinSCP as part of the next lecture. Then we'll actually see how we can use combination of WinSCP and Notepad++ to edit the files on Linux-based systems. At this time, we're in the process of setting up required developer tools on Windows to access files from the Linux file system. Already, we have installed something called as Notepad++. As part of this lecture, let's go ahead and install a new tool called as WinSCP. To install WinSCP on Windows, you can go to the Windows machine, open the browser. You have to follow similar instructions what we have seen with respect to Notepad++ earlier. Let's go to the google.com here. Then you should be able to search for WinSCP. Once again, this is not available for Mac. You might have some other tool with respect to Mac. There is something called as FileZilla. FileZilla is available for both Mac as well as Windows. However, for Windows, WinSCP is more popular. Now, let me click on download here to go to the download link with respect to WinSCP. Let's make sure we scroll down here. We should be able to click on this to download WinSCP. You can also get it from Microsoft. Probably this might be better compared to this one. However, there's a price associated with it. It is $9.99. Let's click on this one to get the free version of WinSCP. In most of the organizations, you will get WinSCP installed on your laptops. You might have to work with IT organizations within your company, and then you should be able to get WinSCP installed on your machine. Even with respect to Notepad++ also, you can actually go through your IT to actually get a Notepad++ installed on your Windows-based machines. Many times, as users of your organization laptops, you might not get admin permissions. To make sure you get these, you have to work with your IT team. Just raise the tickets with your IT teams to get these things installed. However, if you have local admin permissions, you should be able to install by yourself. Now, it is already downloaded. You can see here. Again, exe file is downloaded, which means executable related to WinSCP is downloaded. Let me go to the folder here. We can see WinSCP here. Now we should be able to double click on this to actually install WinSCP on this machine. I'll be installing for all users on the system. For that, I'm clicking on this. Let me click on accept. Again, I'll be going through typical installation. Let me click on next. Let me click on next. Install. It will take care of installing WinSCP on this Windows-based machine. Now, as part of the final step, you can deselect this. There's no point in opening getting started page. You can launch WinSCP by clicking on finish. Make sure you select this. Now let me click on finish. It will take care of launching WinSCP for you. Now we should be able to connect to remote sites and we should be able to access the files on remote sites. Make sure you have access to some of the remote sites so that you can experiment. In this case, I'll be using EC2 instances provisioned from AWS to configure WinSCP to connect to those remote machines and access the files from our Windows-based systems. I'll take care of configuring remote sites as part of the next lecture. Yeah, we have successfully set up WinSCP on Windows. Let's understand how to configure remote sites using WinSCP. Already we have a couple of instances provisioned from AWS. I'll try to configure these things. Either you can configure using password or without password as well. On these servers, I have demonstrated about how to enable password login and also create a user with password. Already I have enabled password for Ubuntu user on these systems. First, let me make sure I can connect to those using SSH. Then I'll take care of configuring WinSCP. Let me go here. Let me first copy the public DNS of one of the EC2 instances here. This is the public DNS. Let me go to the Windows. Let me open PowerShell here. Once I'm in the PowerShell, I should be able to say SSH Ubuntu the public DNS of the EC2 instance. Let me hit enter. You can see that it have prompted for the password. Now let me enter the password. Now the password is working. So using password login, as long as you can log in onto the remote machine, you should be able to configure WinSCP. Now let me exit from here. Let me open WinSCP here. Let me select new site here. You can see that here we can enter the hostname. As part of the hostname, you should be able to enter either IP address or you can also enter DNS if DNS is available. As DNS is available, let me paste that DNS here. It is already copied into the buffer. Here you can either use SFTP or SCP or FTP to actually copy the files from the remote machines. I'll be using SFTP. Now I have to enter the username here. The username is nothing but Ubuntu. Then I can also enter the password. Let me enter the password. Let me click on save here. If you want to configure a particular folder, you can choose folders here. As of now, we don't have any folders and hence it is not showing up any folders here. Let me actually click on save password. However, you can see that it is saying not recommended, but I typically use it. Be careful if you are actually saving the password. Make sure you don't give access to your work systems to others. Now you should be able to click on OK. Now the site is created. If you want, you can create a folder and move this site to that folder as well. Now you should be able to click on login to log in onto the remote machine. However, let me create a folder here. For that, you should be able to click on manage. There should be an option to create a new folder. You can see here, click on new folder. Let's say EC2 instances for the folder name. Let me click on OK. Now I should be able to move this into the EC2 instances folder. Typically, I manage all these connections based upon the type of the environment. I might have dev, UAT, prod, etc. All the prod will be under prod. All the UAT servers will be under UAT, so on and so forth. Depending upon your preference, you should be able to create multiple folders and take it further. Now I should be able to click on login. You can see that it is actually connecting to the remote machine. You just have to say yes here. Now I'm able to connect to the remote machine and I'm able to access all the folders and files on the remote machine. Let me maximize this here. On the right side, you have details with respect to remote machine. On the left side, you have details related to your Windows system. This is how you should be able to use this interface to review the files and folders and also to copy the files and folders between these two systems. You can add more connections. Let me actually add one more connection here. For that, you can actually go to a new connection somewhere here. Remote. There is no option here. Let me go to session. Here you have new session. You can go to the sites here. You can click on site manager. Now you can see the pop-up which we have seen earlier. Let's add one more site here. This time I'll be configuring another site using passwordless login. Let's take care of configuring another site using passwordless login as part of the next lecture. So far we have configured one remote site using password login. Now let's go to the details related to passwordless login. At this time, we're in the process of adding sites to WinSCP so that we can access files on the remote machines from Windows. Already we have configured one of the machine using password login. Now let's go to the details about configuring it using passwordless login. Keep in mind that we already have jsdemo.pem under .ssh folder on WSL. On Windows, we have it as part of the downloads folder itself. Let's review it and then let's take it further. So in this case, I'm again back to the Windows-based system. Let me open File Explorer here. As part of the downloads, you can see jsdemo.pem. We need to use it to configure passwordless login while adding the site. Already we have opened the pop-up to add the site. Now you should be able to click on new site here. Then you can choose SFTP, port number is 22. When it comes to the host name, let's pick the host name of the second instance. In this case, I am picking the public IPv4 DNS of this machine. It is copied. Let me go back here. Let me paste here. When it comes to the username, it is nothing but Ubuntu. If you want to use password, you can enter password here and then click on save. However, we would like to configure without password. For that, we need to pass the private key file. The way you can pass the private key file is by clicking on advanced. Once you click on advanced, it will open this pop-up. You have to go to SSH. As part of SSH, you have authentication. Once you are in the authentication, you should be able to configure your private key file here. Now let me click on this. The private key file is under downloads folder. Let me go to the downloads folder. Let me say all here. You can see options such as PPK, PEM, etc. In this case, our extension is PEM. That's why it is not showing up when default one is selected here. The default one is nothing but PPK. Either you can choose this one or you can also choose this one. Let's choose this one. You can see the PEM file here. Now you should be able to select this. Click on open. Say OK. Say save. It is actually converting the PEM file to PPK internally. Let's make sure it is converted by clicking on OK. Now you should be able to click on OK. Now the key is configured. You can click on save. You can choose the folder here. The folder is nothing but EC2 instances for the demo purpose. Now we should be able to click on OK. Now it is saved. Also, it is automatically selected here. You can confirm that the appropriate one is selected by reviewing hostname. Let's click on login. It will take care of logging in into the remote machine without entering the password. It is actually using the private key file that is configured while adding the site using WinSCP new site wizard. Now you can see the files and folders on the remote machine here. This is nothing but the local. Also you can see that we have two connections. This is related to the first one. This is related to the second one. This is how you can add multiple sites and also work using multiple sessions at any point in time using WinSCP. We will see some of the important features that can come handy leveraging WinSCP to support applications that are deployed on remote Linux servers from our Windows systems. As part of the sectional module, we are going through the details related to developer tools for Linux using Windows. So far, we have set up Notepad++ and also we have set up WinSCP. WinSCP is typically used to copy files between local Windows system and remote systems. The remote systems can be Linux-based systems or they can be even Windows-based systems. After setting up WinSCP, we have even created two connections with respect to two different remote instances. Also, we have activated a couple of sessions. This is related to the first server. This is related to the second server. You can actually see that the right side is getting refreshed because under the home folder, on one of the servers we have data folder, on other server we don't have the data folder. Left side, it is actually pointing to documents under the home directory. It is the default location. You should be able to change this location. That being said, now let's make sure we understand WinSCP better to copy files between local Windows-based file system and remote Linux-based file system. You can see that on Windows, it is pointing to documents under home directory. On the remote machines, it is pointing to Ubuntu, which is nothing but home directory for the user that is used to login. Now, if you want to change the local folder on Windows, you should be able to change by clicking on this path. Now you can see that it have gone into ITversity. We should be able to go to the documents and we should be able to access all the files in documents. As of now, there are no files under documents. You can also go to other important folders such as downloads to access files from the folders such as downloads. On the Windows, I will not be either using downloads or documents. Rather, I will be creating a new folder. Let me go to the home folder. Let me right click here. Let me say new directory. Let me give the directory name as data. Now I have data folder on Windows machine. As the data folder is ready, I would like to copy files from the remote machine into this data folder. Let me get into the data folder here. When it comes to the home folder on the remote machine, as of now, there are no folders or files in it. However, we should be able to access the entire file system as long as we have required permissions on the file system. In this case, Ubuntu as user have read permissions on almost all the folders. You can actually click on the / here, which will take us to the root folder on the remote machine. You can see the details here. We are in the root folder. Now we should be able to go to the temp folder. The temp folder have a folder called as data, which contain folders such as cards, NYC_all, retail_db, retail_db_ JSON, etc. Now we should be able to copy these folders onto Windows by just dragging and dropping. In this case, I am dragging and dropping cards. The size of cards is big in size. It will take some time to copy the files related to the cards. To make sure we can perform other tasks, we can click on this to run it in background. Now let me click on this to push it to the background. You should be able to see what is happening as part of the copy process. Now you should be able to trigger another copy by just dragging and dropping another folder. Even the size of NYC_all is big in size and hence it will take some time. It is running in the foreground. In the similar manner related to cards, we should be able to push even the NYC_all copy to the background. Now both of them are copied successfully. We can also drag and drop retail_db and retail_db_JSON. These are small in size and hence they will not take too much time to actually copy contents of these folders onto the Windows machine. Already retail_db is done. Now let me drag and drop retail_db_JSON as well. Now we should be able to access the folders and files directly using File Explorer and also tools such as Notepad++. Let's validate whether we'll be able to access these folders and files under data folder. For that, I'm actually using File Explorer. Let me click on File Explorer here. As of now, it is pointing to downloads folder. You can see here. To go to the home folder, you can actually click on C drive here, then users, then the folder which is named after the logged in user, which is nothing but ITversity in this case. Now I'm in the home folder. You can see the data folder. As part of the data folder, you can see all the folders that are copied from the remote machine onto this machine. You can also go to one of the file here. Let me go to this file. Let me open using Notepad++ to confirm we can actually access the data as well in these files. These files are actually copied onto the local machine. Let me click on look for another app on this PC. Let me search for Notepad++ here. You can see Notepad++. Let me get into the Notepad++ and let me double click Notepad++ here so that the file is opened using Notepad++. This is how you should be able to access the files once they are copied from remote machines onto the local machines using WinSCP. As we have understood the capability of WinSCP, now we also need to understand how to open the files on remote machines directly. For that, we need to use the combination of WinSCP and editors such as Notepad++. I'll cover those details as part of the next lecture. However, before getting into the next lecture, let me go back to the WinSCP here. Once you are here, you can also spend some time in understanding some of these important buttons. For example, if you wanted to go to home folder at any point in time, you should be able to click on it to go to the home folder. Once the files are copied in the background, if they are not visible here, you should be able to refresh by clicking on this. If some other process actually copy the files into this location, you should be able to see those files using refresh here. You can also search for the files using find files. You can also navigate to parent folders from the current folder using this option. You can see that from Ubuntu, it have gone into its home folder, which is nothing but home. Also, you should be able to move back and forward using these arrows. In this case, the previous context is under the home folder, which is nothing but /home/Ubuntu. Then I have clicked on this to go to the parent folder of Ubuntu. Now I am under home. To go back to the previous context, I can just click on it. Now you can see that it have gone to home Ubuntu. You can also click on it to go back to the previous one by moving forward. Now you can see that it have gone to home folder. You can also explore this option to filter. This is also related to finding files. You can also filter using this option. All these options are available on Windows machine as well on the left side. You can see the home folder here. You can always go to the home folder by clicking on this. The home folder is nothing but documents when it comes to the Windows. You can also explore other options that are visible here to understand the tool better. One of the important aspects which you can keep in mind is nothing but properties. You can always check the properties of files and folders by using properties here. Let me go to the temp folder once again. Under temp, we have data folder. If I want to get the properties related to the data folder, I should be able to select the data folder, then click on properties. I should be able to see the properties related to this folder. This is how you can actually get more information about files and folders on remote machine as well as on the local machine. Even with respect to local machine also, you should be able to get the properties of files and folders. If you are interested, you can also explore some of the menu items by yourself to understand this tool better. As of now, the core purpose of WinSCP is covered by copying files from the remote machine onto the local machine. In the similar manner, we should be able to drag and drop files and folders from the local machine, which is nothing but Windows, onto the remote machines. Keep in mind that you need to have write permissions on the folders into which you want to copy the files and folders from local machine onto those remote machines. Unless and until you have write permissions, you will not be able to create files and folders by copying them from local machine onto those folders in remote machines. You just need to keep the permissions also in mind while taking care of copying between the systems. That being said, as we have gone through details related to WinSCP, now let's understand how we can actually access files on the remote machines using combination of WinSCP as well as Notepad++ in the next lecture. As part of the sectional module, we are going through the details related to developer tools for Linux using Windows. So far, we have set up Notepad++ as well as WinSCP. Also, we have explored WinSCP in detail to copy the files between the Windows and remote machines. Now, using the combination of Notepad++ and WinSCP, we should be able to edit the files directly that are there on top of Linux-based systems. Let's go through the details about how to use these two tools to actually access the files on remote machines and also edit them. To access the files on the remote machines using editors such as Notepad++, it is enough to have read permissions on the files on the remote machines. However, to save the changes, we also need to have write permissions. Let's go through the details so that you understand what I am talking about here. First, let's try to review the sshd_config that is there on the remote machine. For that, I am actually using ssh command here. Let me use ssh command to connect to one of the remote machines. I'll be using the same machine which I'm going to use here. In this case, the machine which I'm going to use is nothing but EC2 389.163.226. Let me get the EC2 instance details here. For that, I'm right clicking here. Then let me click on rename session. Now I should be able to copy this. I have copied. Let me click on cancel. Let me go to PowerShell here. Let me say SSH. Then let me paste here. It also copied EC2 instances. I have to clean up EC2 instances from this connect string. Now EC2 instances is removed. Using Ubuntu as user and the public DNS of the second instance, I am trying to connect to that instance. It have prompted for the password. Let me enter the password here. I can also use private key to log in without entering the password. I just have to use -i and specify the private key file name. Now, if I want to access SSH configuration file which is under etc folder, I have to access in this manner. I can say view /etc/ssh then shd_config. Now we should be able to go through the properties in this configuration file. If you are not comfortable using VA editor, it can be counterproductive to use tools like this. Instead of using this approach, it is better to use tools such as Notepad++, which is there on our Windows machine, to review these files. However, to use Notepad++, we should be able to get the list of files on the remote machine. For that, we should be able to use WinSCP. Now, let's check how to use WinSCP and Notepad++ combination to open this file. As we have only read permissions, we'll be able to access, but we'll not be able to make any changes and save those changes onto the remote machine. For that, we need to have write permissions on the file. That being said, let me go to the WinSCP here. Now, the file is under etc folder. Let me click on this to go to the root folder. Underneath this, we have etc folder. In this, we have SSH folder. Either you can use this scroll bar to scroll down to go to the SSH folder, or you can also start typing SSH here. As soon as you type SSH, you can see that it have gone to SSH folder. You can hit space to select. Then you should be able to double click on this. You should be able to see the files under SSH. I think as of now, it got disconnected due to the idle time. It will throw an error. I just have to reconnect to access the files under etc folder. Let's wait until it throws the error. You can see the error here. You can actually click on reconnect to re-establish the connection. Now you can see the folders under etc. You can see SSH folder here. Let me double click. Now I am in the SSH folder. I want to review sshd_config file. Let me right click on it. Then say edit. Then say edit with. Then choose the editor which you want to use. Instead of going that path, if you just right click, then go to edit, then say notepad, it will open using notepad. You can also try opening the file directly. However, it will be opened using notepad. Don't use notepad to edit or review these files. It is not very productive. If you want to open using notepad++, you have to right click, then say edit, then edit with. Even though we are saying edit with, as we don't have write permissions on that file, we will not be able to update directly. Now let me click on browse. We can also configure default editor. If you do not get into the Notepad++ folder like this, you might end up landing in this PC folder or whatever folder it might show you by default. Now you should be able to double click on C drive to go to the C folder or C drive. Notepad++ is installed under program files. We can double click on program files. You can see Notepad++ here. You can double click on it. Then you should be able to choose Notepad++ from here. Then you can say OK. Now the file will be opened using Notepad++. You can actually close all the files except this. Now you should be able to review the details using better editor. You can also make changes. Let me try making changes. I have just hit an enter after 25th line. However, we will not be able to save it. I tried saving it. You will see error in WinSCP. You see here, it is saying permission denied because the user Ubuntu doesn't have write permissions on this file. That's why it is complaining. You can click on skip all to skip this. Then it will just ignore. It will not try to save the changes. You can undo and make sure you come back to original state. This is how you should be able to use Notepad++ to access the files. If you have write permissions, you can also edit and save onto the remote machines directly. Using the combination of WinSCP and Notepad++, you will be able to open the remote files, review the details in the process of troubleshooting data quality issues or bugs, and then you can actually come up with the solutions based upon your findings. This is a very powerful mechanism of troubleshooting the issues or updating the files or code on the remote machines. Make sure you use the combination of WinSCP and editors such as Notepad++ to take care of these tasks if you are not very comfortable using black screen editors such as VI, Nano, etc. As part of the sectional module, we are going to the details related to developer tools for Linux using Windows. In that process, so far we have set up Notepad++, then WinSCP. We have even configured remote sites using WinSCP. We have even copied files from remote sites onto the local machine to demonstrate the capabilities of WinSCP. Also, we have seen how to open files on remote machines using WinSCP and Notepad++. Now, let's go through some of the important features of editors such as Notepad++ so that we can leverage those tools to improve our productivity. Already we have copied the
the files using WinSCP onto the local machine. I'll be demonstrating features of Notepad++ directly using the local files, not the remote files. For that purpose, let me walk you through the files. The files are copied under home directory. Let me go to my home directory. For that, I should be able to scroll down here, go to C drive, then users. The user which I have used to log in into the system is nothing but ITversity. Let me go to ITversity folder. You can see the data folder here. Now I should be able to double click on data folder. You can see that there are 4 folders here. Let's go to cards folder. There is a folder called as small decks. Let's go here. You see there is a small file called as deck of cards, which is of size 11 KB. Also, I think there is only one deck of cards, which is nothing but 52 of them. It is nothing but deck of cards. I will be using this. You can see that there is no extension visible here. There might be extension for this file, or there need not be extension for this file. If you are using Windows to review these things, if you are not sure about the extension, what you can do is you can actually click on view here. Then you should be able to say show, then file name extensions. Actually, these files have extensions. In this case, txt is the extension for this file. Keep in mind that extensions are just for information purpose. They doesn't determine the file type. However, this is a text file. As long as the files are of type text format, we should be able to use Notepad++ to open these files. Not only Notepad++, but any such kind of editors can be used to edit the text files. Typically, our code files are nothing but text files, and hence we should be able to open even our code files using editors such as Notepad++. Now let me open this using Notepad++. I can say open with. Notepad++ is not visible here, and hence I should be able to choose another app here. Let me click on more apps here. You see Notepad++ is already available here. I am actually selecting this, then clicking on OK. I can also check that box to actually take care of opening all text files using Notepad++ going forward. Now the file is opened using Notepad++. Let me zoom in a little bit so that it is visible for you. For that, I should be able to go to view, then zoom, then I should be able to click on this. In case you are using Windows directly, you should be able to use this shortcut, Control+ or even Control+ mouse wheel up. These two shortcuts will work to zoom in. In my case, it will not work because I'm actually using remote desktop. For that purpose, I have to say view, then zoom, then again click on it. Now it is zoomed in. Let me click once more. Now we are good to go. You can see the content in this file. Now you should be able to open many files at once. As of now, I have opened only one file, but if you want, you can open multiple files also. So one of the key features with respect to Notepad++ is to open multiple files at one point in time. You can actually go to a specific folder and open all the files in that folder at once as well. Now let me open another file here just to show some of the key features using these editors. In this case, again, I'm going here. I'm going to small text folder here. There is one more txt file you can see here. I can actually right click, then say open with, then click on Notepad++ directly here. Now you can see that even deckofcards.txt is actually opened using Notepad++. Now we should be able to update these multiple files at once. Many times we might have similar files opened like this, and we would like to update multiple things at once in all the open files. To find and replace, you typically find items under search. You can see here, you should be able to find for a text using find. You can also find in multiple files using find in files. Once you find, if you want to go for next, you can use these shortcuts and you should be able to go to next or even previous. You can explore these options and you can practice a little bit to get familiar about these. Using search, you can not only find but also replace. You can see the replace option here. You can click on it. You can see a pop-up related to replace. In this case, you can enter whatever text you want to replace as part of find what. Then you should be able to specify the string which you want to replace the text that is found. You should be able to replace one at a time. You can replace all in a given file. You can also replace all in all opened documents. For example, in these two files, we have separator pipe between the 3 attribute values related to each card. The 3 attributes are nothing but color, symbol, and then the number or character. Now, instead of using pipe as a separator or delimiter, let's say I would like to use comma. I want to replace all these pipes with commas in all the opened files. I can actually say pipe here. You can validate by clicking on find next to see if pipe is being searched or not. You can see that it is able to search pipe. Whenever I click on find next, it is actually moving the cursor to next pipe. Now I would like to replace all pipes with comma. I should be able to specify comma here. I can actually click on replace all to only replace in this file. However, in this case, I want to replace in all opened documents. Let me click on replace all in all opened documents. I have clicked on OK. As one of the files is 11 MB in size, it took some time to update all the pipes with commas. You should be able to review both the files to confirm all the pipes are replaced with commas. In this manner, you can actually replace the text in multiple opened files at a given point in time. Also, there are quite a few other options with respect to find and replace. You should be able to go here and you can actually explore all the options. We can also use regular expressions to find the strings within opened text files using editors such as Notepad++. Like this, there are quite a few options over a period of time. Make sure you get better at these tools so that you can improve your productivity. Don't blindly repeat the tasks using simple editors such as Notepad. Make sure you understand advanced editors such as Notepad++ or IDEs such as PyCharm, Visual Studio Code, etc. and improve your productivity. That being said, this is a quick overview about editors such as Notepad++. You have to spend time in understanding these tools better. As one of the files is 11 MB in size, it took some time to update all the pipes with commas. You should be able to review both the files to confirm all the pipes are replaced with commas. In this manner, you can actually replace the text in multiple opened files at a given point in time. Also, there are quite a few other options with respect to find and replace. You should be able to go here and you can actually explore all the options. We can also use regular expressions to find the strings within opened text files using editors such as Notepad++. Like this, there are quite a few options over a period of time. Make sure you get better at these tools so that you can improve your productivity. Don't blindly repeat the tasks using simple editors such as Notepad. Make sure you understand advanced editors such as Notepad++ or IDEs such as PyCharm, Visual Studio Code, etc. and improve your productivity. That being said, this is a quick overview about editors such as Notepad++. You have to spend time in understanding these tools better. Also, if you observe for this file, it is red in color. Even here, it is red in color, which means the files are updated but not saved. Now we should be able to hit Ctrl S to save. Now you can see that it is converted to greenish color. However, this is still in red because we have saved this one but not this one. Make sure you save this as well. Now the changes related to this file are saved as well. Now let me close this. Make sure you spend time in understanding these tools better. You can also explore some of these options which can come handy. One of the common option which you typically use, especially when we get the files from remote machines, is showing all characters. If there are any special characters, those special characters will be visible because of this. You can actually click on this and see what is the line ending character and all. It will facilitate you to troubleshoot some of the key issues. That being said, this is a quick overview about the editors such as Notepad++. Make sure you spend time and get better at it if you have to use it as part of your day-to-day work at your office. As part of the sectional model, we are going through the details related to developer tools for Linux using Windows. So far, we have explored Notepad++ and WinSCP. WinSCP is primarily used to copy the files from remote machines to local machines. Notepad++ is primarily used to modify the files locally. You can also get the files remotely using WinSCP and update using Notepad++. However, it can be counterproductive at times to use both WinSCP and Notepad++ to edit the files. We have better advanced editors or IDEs which can actually facilitate us to update the files on remote machines. Also, using WinSCP and Notepad++ combination, we will not be able to update the files that are available as part of Linux systems set up using WSL on Windows. In this lecture, as well as a few subsequent lectures, I will be covering an alternative editor, which is nothing but Visual Studio Code in detail. First, let's go to the details related to setup. Then we'll actually take care of the setup process. I'm closing the Notepad++ here. Also, I'm closing this file explorer. Now let me open the browser. In this case, I'll be searching for Visual Studio Code. For remote development. Now let me hit enter. Visual Studio Code is very powerful advanced editor or IDE. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. Notepad++ is more of editor, whereas Visual Studio Code is IDE. Now you should be able to go here and you can actually get the overview about using Visual Studio Code for remote development. This is representing your Windows machine. This is representing the remote server. As part of your Windows machine, you have to set up Visual Studio Code. Once Visual Studio Code is set up, you should be able to install extensions on top of it. In this case, to enable remote development, you have to install something called as Remote Development Extension Pack. We'll actually go to the details about installing Remote Development Extension Pack once Visual Studio Code is set up. Also, you can actually go to the details about how to use Visual Studio Code Remote Development Extension Pack to develop via remote SSH or remote containers or even remote WSL. We'll go through all the details related to SSH and WSL as part of this sectional module. If you want to get details about what it takes to actually use Visual Studio Code to develop leveraging WSL setup on Windows, you can actually click on this. It will provide you the details about what all steps that are required. First of all, we need to ensure we have WSL on Windows and also Linux setup using WSL. Already we have WSL. Let's validate. I'm opening Windows PowerShell here. Now let me say WSL. You can see that I'm able to get into one of the Linux machines that are set up using WSL. You can see that I am able to get into Linux setup using WSL. As Linux is already set up using WSL, the next step is to install Visual Studio Code on the Windows, not in WSL. Once Visual Studio Code is set up, then we should be able to install Remote Development Extension Pack. The Remote Development Extension Pack will not only facilitate us to open files directly via remote SSH, we should be able to access files that are there as part of WSL as well. As part of the next lecture, let's go to the details about installing Visual Studio Code on Windows, then we'll take it further. As part of this lecture, let's go to the details related to setting up Visual Studio Code on Windows. For that, you just open your favorite browser, then go to the favorite search tool and then search for Visual Studio Code. Once you search for Visual Studio Code, you should be able to go to the downloads by clicking on download here. As we are talking about Windows, we should be able to download this Visual Studio Code. Let me click on this to download Visual Studio Code here. You can see that the executable related to Visual Studio Code is downloaded. You can double click here and install, or you can also go to that folder where it is downloaded. Once you are in the folder, you should be able to double click on this executable to install Visual Studio Code. Now Visual Studio Code is being installed on this machine. Let's wait until it pops up the wizard, then we'll take it further. It is actually saying this user installer is not meant to be run as administrator. If you would like to install VS Code for all users in the system, download the system installer instead from blah blah blah. Are you sure you want to continue? In this case, this is my personal PC. I am the only one who will be logging in to actually use this tool, and hence you installing only for this user is good enough. Let me click on OK here. Now let me accept the agreement. Let me click on next. Let me click on next. Let me click on next. Let me deselect this. I don't want to register code as an editor for supported file types. Let me deselect it. Let me make sure it is added to the path. This is very important. Now let's click on next. It is saying request shell restart, which means you might have to restart the PowerShell if your PowerShell is opened to make sure you can launch Visual Studio Code using PowerShell. Now let's click on install. Now Visual Studio Code is being installed on this Windows based machine. Once it is installed, we should be able to open the editor and then we can take it further. Now Visual Studio Code is installed. Let me click on finish to launch the Visual Studio Code. I made sure that launch Visual Studio Code is selected. As it is selected, you can see that Visual Studio Code is launched. Now let me double click to maximize. You can select any folder on your file system and you should be able to open the folder. The folder will be opened as workspace. You should be able to start editing the files that are there as part of the folder. I'll demonstrate about updating the code using one of the projects which I have as part of my Git in future. For now, just make sure that you have Visual Studio Code installed on your Windows machine. As and when it is required, we will cover rest of the details with respect to Visual Studio Code. At this time, we are in the process of setting up Visual Studio Code on Windows, especially for remote development. Already Visual Studio Code is installed as part of the previous lecture. Now let's go to the details about adding extension for remote development. One of the ways to install extensions is by clicking on this. It will take you to the extensions wizard. As part of this wizard, you should be able to search for extensions that are there in Marketplace. Let's search for remote development here.
You can see there is an extension by name remote development. We should be able to click on this. It will take care of installing all the required extensions for remote SSH, remote WSL, remote containers, etc. Now let's click on install. It will take care of installing these remote WSL, remote containers, also remote SSH. Now they are being installed. You can actually see here. Remote SSH is installed, remote containers is installed, remote WSL is installed, and also it have installed this one, remote SSH edit configuration files. As the remote development extension kit is installed, we should be able to open files using SSH or WSL. Let's go through those details as part of the subsequent lectures. Now let's close this. Let me also go back to this where I have got away from extensions. You can also look at this one, which is nothing but Remote Explorer. Once we start opening the files on remote machines, we should be able to use this as well. That being said, as of now, Visual Studio Code is installed on this machine, and also Remote Extension Development Kit is installed. Now it is time for us to explore how to use it to access files via SSH or WSL. As part of this external module, we are going through details related to developer tools for Linux using Windows. In that process, we are actually exploring Visual Studio Code, especially for remote development. Already we have installed Visual Studio Code and also Remote Development Extension Kit. As Visual Studio Code and extension for remote development are ready, let's set up a project on remote machine. Once the project is set up, we'll actually go through the details about opening that project remotely using the extension that is installed on top of Visual Studio Code. In this case, the remote server is provisioned on AWS. You can actually get the details of my AWS instances. Let me open my browser here. The browser is nothing but this one. You can see that I have two machines. The names are copy demo. Ignore the names for now. Let's pick one of them. I'll be picking this one. We can use this public IPv4 DNS. Now let me go back to my Windows machine. I should be able to validate using terminal that comes as part of Visual Studio Code itself. This is one of the good features with respect to IDEs such as Visual Studio Code. Now I can actually say new terminal. You can see that PowerShell based terminal is opened. It have SSH as well. Before going further, let me move this little bit up so that we have more real estate here. And also let me make sure the font is bigger in size. For that, I should be able to go to File, then Preferences, go to Settings. Now I should be able to expand window, not window. I think the font related settings will be under text editor. You can see the font here. Now let me move this down a little bit so that I can increase the font. You can see the details related to font size here. Let me increase it to 18. However, this will be affecting only the editor here, not the terminal. I have to search for terminal as part of the settings here. Let me search for terminal. Let's go to the terminal here. Now let's see if there are anything related to font in this. You can see the font size related to terminal here. Now I should be able to increase it to 18. You can observe that the size of font is increased. Let me increase it to 20. Now it is font 20. We should be able to close the settings here. Now we can actually move this up. Now I can run command called as sh, then -i, downloads. As part of the downloads, I have jsdemo.pem. Then I should be able to say ubuntu @ Let's go back here. Let's get the public IPv4 DNS copied. Then let's paste here. Now it is pasted. Now let me hit enter. Now I am connected to that instance. Already we should have Git on this. Let's validate whether we have Git or not. As we have Git, we should be able to clone a project by saying git clone. You can pick any project. In this case, I'll be picking a project called as Data Copier. Let me say git clone https:// then github.com. Data Copier is under my account. The account name is nothing but ITversity. Let me try ITversity here. If ITversity doesn't work, then I will use dgadiraju. After the GitHub account, we have to specify the repository name. I have already specified the repository name and ran this command. You can see that Data Copier repository is cloned onto this machine. We should be able to run ls-ltr to validate. We can see Data Copier folder here. You can actually say find data-copier to see all the details related to this data copier folder. It also shows the files related to .git. You can ignore the .git folder. Now you should be able to go into data copier folder, then run lsf-ltr to see all the subfolders in this. That being said, as the repository is set up on the remote machine, let's see how we can use Visual Studio Code Remote Development Extension Kit to actually access this repository remotely from Windows. Once we have that set up, we should be able to make changes to our code without having a local copy of our code base. Many times when we start working on projects, we might have to validate on the remote machines after developing the code. Instead of maintaining the copy locally, we should be able to use this remote development approach, and we should be able to develop directly on the remote machines. Let's go to the details about using remote SSH that comes as part of remote development extension kit that is set up on top of Visual Studio Code to access this repository from Windows. In the process of understanding Visual Studio Code for remote development, so far we have set up Visual Studio Code, and also we have added required extension. Once the required extension is added, we have even set up a project on remote machine. Now let's explore Visual Studio Code with the extension to make sure we can develop leveraging remote SSH that comes as part of the remote development extension kit. You can actually scroll down here. You see a green icon here. You should be able to click on this. Let me go to the left here. Now you see it is actually showing all these options. New WSL window, connect to host, open folder in containers, and so forth. This is related to WSL. This is related to SSH. This is related to remote containers. At this time, we are talking about opening the projects which are there on remote machines via SSH, and hence we should be able to select this. Once you select it, you should be able to see two options: add new SSH host, configure SSH hosts. In this case, I am trying to add a new host. Let me click on this to add new host. Once you click on add new host, you will be seeing this one. In this case, you can actually say SSH, then -i, then downloads. I hope downloads is visible from here. It is not. I have to specify the fully qualified path for the jsdemo.pem. It is nothing but C:// then users, then itversity, then downloads, then gsdemo.pem. Ubuntu is the username @ then we have to specify the public IPv4 DNS of that instance. Let me copy this. Let me paste here. Now let me hit enter. It is asking to update configuration file. We should be able to choose this to update config that is there under .ssh. If you want to review, you can click on it and you should be able to review the configuration changes that are done. You can see that it have updated the config file so that we will be able to connect to the remote servers without worrying too much about entering the password going forward because we have configured identity file here. That being said, we should be able to close this. Now let me scroll down here. Let me click on this. Let's say connect to host here. Now you can see the host that is already configured. We should be able to click on it. It will open a pop-up here. You can actually click on allow access here. It is asking for the platform. It is nothing but a Linux based one, and hence let me choose Linux. Now it is actually setting up the remote project for us. You have to wait until the setup is completely done. Let me close this. Now you should be able to open a folder. You can see that you are seeing folders from the remote machine. In this case, I am interested in a data copier, and hence let me choose the data copier. Now let me click on OK. The project is opened here as part of Visual Studio Code. This is nothing but the workspace associated with our project or repository. We should select this, click on I trust the orders, then we should be good to go. Now the project or repository is set up for remote development via SSH. This is how you should be able to take care of developing using remote development extension kit where the project or repository is available on the remote server. We can also develop the code and validate directly from Visual Studio Code on Windows instead of logging in onto the remote machine and running over there. You can also open the terminal associated with this. It is very straightforward. Let's maximize this. Now let me scroll up. You can see all the options which you have seen earlier for local development. You can actually say terminal, click on new terminal, It will take care of launching the terminal from the remote machine. You can see here, this is related to remote machine, not the local Windows based terminal. Now you should be able to open the files also. Let me open requirements.txt. You can see that the requirements.txt is opened. If you want to add any requirement, you can add here. Then you should be able to run pip install command to install. This is how you should be able to use Visual Studio Code for remote development. It is a very powerful mechanism. Many times we might want to have the projects developed on remote development servers. Visual Studio Code simplifies that process using remote development extension kit. As we have gone through the details related to remote SSH, now it is time for us to explore remote WSL. As part of the previous lecture, we have gone through the details about opening the project that is set up on remote machine using remote SSH that comes as part of remote development extension kit. Now it is time for us to explore remote WSL. Let me exit from here and also let me close this. The remote project is closed. Now let me go to the WSL. For that I'll be using PowerShell. Let me open the PowerShell here. Once we are in the PowerShell, let me say WSL to get into the Linux that is set up using WSL. When it comes to the files that are there under the default folder, which is nothing but home folder, we should be able to access directly using local from Visual Studio Code. For example, in this case, we have data folder and downloads folder in the home directory. This directory is accessible from both Windows as well as Linux. The Windows folder is nothing but C users itversity. You can actually open the file explorer. Then you should be able to go to this PC, double click on C drive, then users, then itversity. Whatever you are seeing here is visible here as well. You can see the data folder as part of this file explorer as well. You should be able to open this data folder directly using Visual Studio Code, as this folder is visible both from Windows as well as Linux. However, now let me say CD. I'm going into the home directory of the Linux user dgazraju. You can validate by saying pwd here. This is the home directory. You will not be able to access files that are controlled by Linux directly. In this case, this folder is controlled by Windows. All those files that are controlled by Windows are visible from Linux that is set up using WSL. But whatever files that will be added under those folders which are controlled by Linux directly, those will not be visible on Windows directly. Now let me go to the file explorer. Let me go to the data folder. As part of the data folder, we have cards. In this, we have folder called as smalldex, where we have a very small file. We should be able to open this using Visual Studio Code directly. I should be able to say choose another app. Now let's click on more apps. You can see Visual Studio Code here. We should be able to select Visual Studio Code and then say OK. Now the file is opened locally. Let's click on open. You can see the file here. Now let me close this. If you want to open those folders or files that are controlled by Linux directly, it is not that straightforward. We cannot open the files and folders directly. We have to use remote WSL that comes as part of remote development extension kit. To understand the overall process, let's set up a project in WSL. I'm already in the home folder, which is controlled by Linux. It is not controlled by Windows. Now we should be able to set up a project here. There is a project called as Data Copier under my account as a repository in GitHub. I should be able to use Git here. Git is already set up as part of this machine. We should be able to say git clone, then https:// then github.com, then / then itversity. The repository name is nothing but data-copier. Now the data copier is set up locally on this machine. You can actually say ls-ltr and you should be able to see the data copier here. Let me go to the data copier here. Let me say ls-ltr to see folders and files in this. Now let's see how we can open this using Visual Studio Code. For that I have to launch Visual Studio Code. Let me search for Visual Studio Code here. Now Visual Studio Code is launched. As you have seen with respect to remote SSH, we should be able to use a similar approach here. We have to scroll down here, click on this, then click on remote WSL here. You can see that the remote WSL is being set up using Ubuntu 20.04. That is the operating system using which the virtual machine is running using WSL. Now we should be able to say open folder. You can see the files and folders in the home directory under the Ubuntu based machine which is set up using WSL. Now I should be able to scroll down. In this case, I'm interested in data copier. Let me select data copier here. Let me click on OK. Now the GitHub repository which is cloned is set up as workspace in this. We should be able to take care of development using this workspace. Let's select this, click on this one. Now we should be able to update depending upon our requirements for this project. This is how you should be able to set up projects or repositories that are cloned for development using Ubuntu, that is set up using WSL, leveraging Visual Studio Code that is set up on Windows. We need to have the remote development extension kit, and then we need to understand the process of setting up projects for local development where the actual repository is on WSL. Make sure you are comfortable with these things to improve your productivity. Don't copy files back and forth in case if you have to develop for the Linux operating system. It is a very powerful mechanism, and hence make sure you are comfortable with this depending upon your requirements for the project you are working on. As part of this sectional module, we are going through the details related to developer tools for Linux using Windows. At this time, we are talking about Visual Studio Code. Already we have seen how to set up Visual Studio Code, how to add extension for remote development, and also we have seen how to access the projects that are set up on remote machines via SSH, and also the projects that are set up on WSL using the remote development extension kit that is added as part of Visual Studio Code. Many times we might want to update the configuration files on remote machines. We should be able to leverage the Visual Studio Code even for that purpose. Let's see how we can actually access configuration files such as sshd_config so that we can review, and also if we have right permissions, we can update. I'm actually clicking on this to open a remote window. This time I'm actually connecting to the remote host using remote SSH. Let me click on connect to host here. Already we have configured one remote instance. I'm choosing the same instance here. Now you can see that a new session using Visual Studio Code is established. Also, this Visual Studio Code session is connected to the remote machine. Let's double click on this to maximize. You can actually access the recents here. You should be able to open whatever you want. You can also open new file by clicking on open file here. In this case, I am talking about accessing the configuration files related to SSH, and hence I should be able to delete this to go to the root folder. The configuration files will be typically under etc. When it comes to the SSH, the folder for SSH is nothing but SSH. You can see the folder here. Now let's choose one of the file from this location. The file which I am interested is nothing but sshd_config. Let me select this. Let me say open. You can see that the file is opened using Visual Studio Code editor. Now it is easier for us to search for whatever we are looking for. If we have right permissions, we can also update and save. It will be saved onto the remote machine directly. As of now, we don't have right permissions directly using the user using which we have connected to this machine, and hence we'll be only be able to review the properties that are there in this file. Will not be able to update. Make sure you understand that using the remote features, you should be able to not only access the project or project repositories, you can access the configuration files on the remote machines as well. It is a very powerful mechanism. Make sure you understand the relevance and make sure you start using this feature. As part of the sectional module, we are going through the details related to developer tools for Linux using Windows. In this lecture, we'll actually go through the details about setting up an important tool called as Git Bash. There are alternatives also. Tools such as Git Bash will facilitate us to clone the Git repositories onto Windows machines. This might not be relevant when it comes to developer tools for Linux using Windows. This is a developer tool on Windows itself, primarily to clone the repositories. To set up Git Bash, again, you can open your favorite browser. In this case, I am opening Chrome. Now you should be able to search for Git Bash. You can say Git Bash on Windows. You should be able to click on this. You can actually click on download. The website we are using is nothing but Git for Windows. Now you can see that the executable is downloaded. Let's expand this, then click on show in folder. Now let's take care of installing Git, which includes Git Bash on Windows. Once you double click on that executable, it will open this wizard. You should be able to follow the steps in the wizard to take care of the installation of Git Bash. Let me click on next. Let me click on next. Let's review these things. I think I'm okay with whatever options that are chosen here. Now let me click on next. Let me say next. Let me click on next. Let me click on next. I'm just following the typical installation process. I'm not customizing any of the preferences here. Let me click on next. Let me click on next. Let me click on next. Even this one I would like to leave the default. Let me click on next. Let me click on next, 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 next. There are so many options here. Finally, install. It just took some time to install. Let me deselect view release notes, then select launch git bash. Click on finish. It will open the git bash for us. Git bash not only provides access to git commands, it also provides access to several Linux commands, as git bash is also Linux terminal emulator or simulator. That being said, first let me increase the font size. For that I should be able to go to options here. Then I can choose text. I should be able to change the font size by clicking on select here. Let me choose 18 here. Let me click on apply and then OK. You can also click on save. You can confirm that the font size is increased. Now let me clear the screen here. You can see Git being installed in this git bash, and hence we should be able to use git that comes as part of git bash to clone the repositories and then take it further. For now, just make sure that you install git and tools such as git bash installed using Git for Windows website. Once they are set up, we should be able to leverage to clone the repositories as and when it is required. We will use it based upon our requirements in future. As part of the section module, we are going through the details related to developer tools for Linux using Windows. In that process, so far we have gone through the details related to Notepad++, WinSCP, Visual Studio Code, etc. Many times we might want to compare folders or files. There is a powerful tool called as Beyond Compare. Let's go through the details about setting up Beyond Compare. We'll also see how to use it to compare the folders. We'll actually come up with a realistic scenario. We'll use that realistic scenario to understand the power of Beyond Compare. To install Beyond Compare, you should be able to open your favorite browser. In this case, I am opening Chrome. Here, you should be able to search for Beyond Compare. There's a typo in compare. Let me fix the typo. Now the spelling is right. Beyond Compare is available for both Windows as well as Mac. In this case, I'll be installing on my Windows-based system. Now you can go to the download here. You can choose Windows. Then you should be able to download this one. I'm downloading the English version. Now you can see that exe is downloaded. I should be able to go to the folder. Now I should be able to double click on this to install Beyond Compare. I'll be following typical installation. Whenever it prompt, I typically say next here. When it comes to this page, for me, it doesn't matter whether I choose install for all users or install for current user. It is because I am the only one who will be going to use this machine. I am choosing install for all users, which is default. Let me click on next. Let me accept the agreement. Then click on next. Then click on next. Let me deselect this. I don't want to create a shortcut on my desktop. Let me choose these two things. Let me click on next. Then say install. It will take care of installing Beyond Compare on this machine. It will be a quick install. You can see Beyond Compare is installed. Make sure you select this and click on finish so that Beyond Compare is launched. Once Beyond Compare is launched, we should be able to compare multiple folders or files using this tool. Let's come up with a realistic scenario and see how we can use this tool to actually compare folders, not just files. As part of the section module, we are going through the details related to developer tools for Linux using Windows. At this time, we are talking about Beyond Compare to compare files and folders. We should be able to use Beyond Compare if you have licensed version to compare files and folders directly on Linux. In this case, I don't have licensed version, and hence I'll be having local copies of the files and folders which I want to compare. If you are comfortable with the diff, you should be able to use the diff on Linux, and you should be able to compare files and folders and get the details as well. That being said, to make sure I have appropriate environment, already I have covered how to install Git and Git Bash on Windows. We already have Git. Once you have Git and Git Bash on Windows, as part of the PowerShell also, you should be able to run commands such as git clone to clone a repository. Let's validate whether Git is available or not. You can see that Git is available. Now let me pick up a repository from my account and then we'll take it further. We can also create a new directory by saying mkdir space bc demo. BC stands for Beyond Compare. Now the folder is created. Now I can actually go to that folder by saying cd bc demo. Now I am in that folder. Let me go to the browser now. you can actually go to github.com/itversity/etl-pyspark. This is the repository which I am going to clone. I'll be cloning it twice using a git clone command. You can see that this repository have quite a few folders and files. You can pick any git repository, not necessarily this one. Now let me go here. Now let me say git clone. Let me paste here. Hit enter. Now a new folder will be created. The folder name will be etl-pyspark, which is nothing but our repository name itself. You are seeing this error because I attempted to run ls-ltr command, which is not a valid Windows command. If it is Linux, it would have worked. You should be able to use command called as dir to see folders and files in this location. There is only one folder called as etl-pyspark. Now let me open File Explorer. Let me go to the home directory, which is nothing but users itversity. Let me click on desktop. Actually, I have to go to this PC, then C drive, then users, then itversity. This is the home folder. You can see BC demo here. BC stands for Beyond Compare. Now let me actually rename it as etl-pyspark prod. Let's assume that we have the version of code which is running in prod at this time under this folder name. Now let me clone the repository once again. And now we have two folders, one with this name, etl-pyspark, the second one with this name, etl-pyspark prod. As I have cloned both the folders using same repository, both of them should have exactly the same files. We can confirm using Beyond Compare. However, before getting into using Beyond Compare to compare these folders, let me pick one file as part of etl-pyspark prod folder and manipulate it a little bit. Then I'll take it further. To manipulate one of the file, I should be able to get into that folder, right click on one of the file and then say open with. Then I should be able to click on more apps. I can use advanced editors such as Notepad++ or Visual Studio Code. In this case, I'll be using Notepad++. However, you can also use Visual Studio Code or even PyCharm if you have PyCharm, and then you can take it further. So in this case, I'm actually manipulating this using Visual Studio Code. Now, as part of this, let me say I mentioned instead of run_job, run_job1. That is the change which I have made to one of the file. Now, if I use Beyond Compare to compare both the folders, I should be able to drill down into this difference very quickly. Let's see how it can be done using Beyond Compare as part of the next lecture. As part of this external module, we are talking about developer tools for Linux using Windows. We have gone through several tools such as Notepad++, WinSCP, Visual Studio Codes, and so forth. At this time, we are actually talking about Beyond Compare to compare the files and folders. Beyond Compare also have features such as comparing files remotely on Linux-based systems, but it requires license. As I don't have license, I have simulated by creating two repositories on Windows itself. Now, let's make sure how to use Beyond Compare to compare two folders on Windows. The same thing can be applied even on files and folders that are there in Linux. However, you need to have license for that. That being said, now let me launch Beyond Compare. For that, I should be able to go to the search bar here. Then I should be able to search for Beyond Compare. You can see Beyond Compare here. When we use the trial version, we might see a pop-up for the first time. If you see the pop-up, you just have to hit continue to go to this window. Once you are in this window, you should be able to click on Folder Compare. In this case, we are trying to compare two different folders. The first folder can be selected on the left. The second folder can be selected on the right. In this case, you can actually specify the path directly, or you can actually click on this to go to a specific folder. In this case, we want to compare BC demo, then etl-pyspark prod and etl-pyspark. You can see BC demo under users itversity, which is nothing but home folder. Now I should be able to select one of these two folders. Let's pick etl-pyspark on the left side. Now all the folders and files related to etl-pyspark are visible here. In the similar manner, we should be able to click on this. Then go to itversity, then BC demo, then choose the second folder, which is nothing but etl-pyspark prod. Click on OK. Now you can see the list of items from etl-pyspark on the left side, then etl-pyspark prod on the right side. However, you can see there are all the folders associated with these folders here. We might want to exclude .git. .git doesn't contain source code, and hence we might not be interested in comparing the contents of those. So we can right click on this and then say exclude. it will be excluded. Now to compare and see all the differences, you have to select these on both the sides and then right click. Then click on compare contents. Otherwise, everything will be shown as difference because the parent folders are named differently. The parent folders are nothing but ETL PySpark and ETL PySpark prod, and hence it is showing as differences with respect to every file. But once we select all and then once we click on compare contents, then we have to choose binary comparison. We have to click on start to actually start comparing the contents. Once the comparison is done, then you will actually see the differences. In this case, there is only one difference that is associated with main.py. Rest everything is equal or same. You can actually expand ETL PySpark and you can see all the subfolders and files are same. You can also click on diffs to see only the differences. You can also click on same to see all the files which are same on both the sides. In this case, it is relevant for us to click on diff, and then we should be able to double click on this to see the actual difference. However, same is selected automatically here. For that reason, we are actually seeing the contents which are same in both the files. To see the differences, you can click on differences, or you can also click on all to see all the details associated with these two files. This is how you should be able to drill down to the differences in the folder structures. That being said, if you go back to this and if we click on all, if there is a difference in one of the file in one of the subfolder in the folder hierarchy, the entire hierarchy will be shown as difference. We should be able to drill down and we should be able to see the differences easily. This is how you should be able to use tools such as Beyond Compare, not only to compare the code that is deployed on different environments, but also to compare data for the data quality issues. In most of the enterprises already might have enterprise license for tools such as Beyond Compare. You just have to work with your IT organization and set up these tools to make sure you streamline the process of troubleshooting with your code or with your datasets. That being said, even though I have demonstrated using Git repositories on Windows, you should be able to use tools such as Beyond Compare against the files that are there on Linux as well. However, you might have to have the licensed version. Most of the organizations might already have the license for such kind of tools. Make sure you understand the relevance of these tools and also make sure you get better at using these things so that your productivity over a period of time goes up significantly.